William Raff, 9/11. Folks, I interviewed William in Brooklyn, New York. It was August the 25th, 2011, about 14 years ago. I was in Elizabeth, New Jersey for 3 days, went downtown New York City, took a lot of footage for my 9/11 film, and then the next 3 days I was in Brooklyn, New York, and I interviewed William there. Great man, just one of these amazing stories. This is my fifth full entire story from my 9/11 documentary that I'm featuring on this YouTube channel and radio station. And I'm going to hopefully someday have all of them. But as we get closer to the 9/11 anniversary, I'm going to release more of these. I know you want to watch military veterans, but you know, this was a war zone, folks, and the history that was made here. This is 24 years ago. Think about it. That'd be like World War II ending in 1945 and me interviewing veterans in 1969. Or Vietnam ending around 1972 and interviewing Vietnam vets around 1996. So that's how many years has passed. And this was a war zone. This was an incredible piece of history. Our young kids need to hear this in the schools, and I'm going to work on doing that. But William, he worked with the Fuji Bank Limited company. He was on the 82nd floor of the South Tower, Tower 2. And they occupied 79, 80, 81, 82 of the South Tower. As you know, the first plane hit the North Tower about 8:46 a.m. and then the second plane hit a little after 9 o'clock into the South Tower, right where William Raff was working. In fact, he lost 26 of his co-workers, I think 23 or 26 of his co-workers, I think 23. And so he evacuated down to the 44th floor of the South Tower, and he obviously felt the impact, but got out of there. And they wanted them to go back to their offices, and he was there in '93 when the bombing was there. So a lot of them knew that, said, no, we're not going to stay here. So great story. I'll let him tell the story. But I'm just really happy to be able to feature your story here, William. And thank you for sharing your story with me. And he tells some amazing things in the story. So I want to thank Michael and Darlene Sarofsky. They've been gracious enough to support my work the last couple of years. And I appreciate both of you so much. Michael for sponsoring some of my 9/11 films. And folks, it's had over 1 million views on my YouTube channel, the 9/11 film. So a lot of people are getting involved in these stories after all these years. But Michael and Darlene, thank you. God bless you. And I'm happy to work with you again. Okay, folks, let's honor William Raff now in this story, 9/11 Remembered, a Day of Infamy. Like I said, this is one of my featured videos on my YouTube channel and on my radio station. Voices of History Radio. So if you'd like to get involved with this work, you know how to do it. I don't need to tell you. You know how to do it. Just get a hold of me and we can get you involved too. So one more plug for the schools. I'm trying to contact educators. If you're an educator or you have kids in school, grandkids in school, anything to do with the educational system, get a hold of me or send the link to these people. That's all it is. It's a YouTube link, and I'm not going to sell a DVD or a video. I'm just going to donate this back into the schools. They need to hear it. Every child in America needs to hear this story once. It should be mandatory showing in schools. That's what my comments say when I read them. So, okay, God bless you. Thank you for watching, listening, subscribing to this channel, and we'll see you next time. God bless you.
Thought about this for 10 years, and I have many different points of view, both, you know, from the day it happened, the aftermath, and the perspective of 10 years later. And
remember the night before 9/11? Do you remember anything significant, or just was it you were home, at work, the night before September 11th? What do you remember about the night before?
The night before was just like any other night. September 10th was Monday night. It was unremarkable, normal, and not particularly unusual in any way. There was absolutely no sense of anything different that was going to happen.
How about the morning of September 11th? Describe the morning to me, getting up that morning, going to work, and then walk me into that day.
September 11th, 2001 was a beautiful blue sky day. It was unusually beautiful, and I noticed that. In addition, it was a primary voting election day, and so the polls were open and some people were going to vote before they would go to work or conduct their daily activities. It was also the first day of school for some school systems, and so as a result, the offices perhaps were a little bit less filled with people at the time of the attack, but it was an unremarkable day, and it was just normal. Something that, I mean, as the events unfolded, they really came from out of the blue, and that's literally and figuratively speaking, when these planes entered the tower number 1, the North Tower, it was right out of the blue sky. No one could ever have anticipated. And in fact, when it occurred, it was incomprehensible what had happened.
So what do you remember doing? I mean, okay, let's just take me into the building that day. You ride the train to the building, you get inside, you go get a cup of coffee, you go upstairs, you check in at your desk, and then also tell me again the name of the company you worked with.
At that time, the company was the Fuji Bank Limited, and Fuji Bank was in the process of merger with 2 other banks. These are very large Japanese banks, Daiichi Kango Bank and Industrial Bank of Japan. In fact, the Daiichi Kango Bank had just opened about 2 weeks before September 11th, a brand new trading floor, which was located on, I believe, the 49th floor of tower number 1. So you had 3 banks, one of which was in tower number 1, Daiichi Kango Bank, a second bank, the Fuji Bank Limited, which was in the tower number 2, and the third bank, which was and still is located in Rockefeller Center, Industrial Bank of Japan. It was a normal day, a quiet day, a beautiful day, September day, and I took the number 1 subway, 7th Avenue line, as usual. There was a stop within the concourse of the World Trade Center, and came off the train, went up to my office, probably about 8:15 or 8:30, thereabouts. And as usual, I just turned on my computer, reading email, and as I had done for many years and still do to this day, I was enjoying cinnamon raisin bagel and a cup of coffee as I watched, or I looked at my screen and did email and maybe read some papers in my inbox. It was very quiet, unremarkable.
What was your title at that time? What was the job that you did? What was your title?
Senior Vice President, and I remain a Senior Vice President. In fact, the 3 banks I had mentioned previously merged about a year after that, and now it's called the merged bank, consisting of the 3 entities, is the Mizuho Corporate Bank Limited. And I still work there. It'll be 17 years in about a month that I will have been at that bank.
Okay, so just it's quiet, you've had your morning coffee or whatever, you're eating a bagel, you said. So tell me what happens next.
It was very quiet. Perhaps there were, roughly speaking, a third of the staff were present. We had a significant staff, 4 floors, 79th floor, 80, 81, and 82. I was on the top floor of our 4 floor, on 82nd floor, and somehow became aware that something had happened. And I remember looking to the right, and my colleague was looking out the window. We were on the opposite side of the building, looking south, and so we could not see the north tower where the plane had entered. This was just after 8:46 a.m. when the first plane entered tower number 1. I'm not sure, but I believe in my head that I heard a very unusual announcement over our company's public address system. A very terse, very unusual announcement that said, "Evacuate the building." It sounded serious, although when I asked others afterwards, no one recollected that announcement. And sadly, the property manager, the facilities manager for my company, who would have been the one to make that announcement, perished. And so there was no way of knowing. But just after that time, someone kind of who had been on the other side and could see from the 82nd floor, could see the North Tower, number 1, and what had happened, said, "Just get out." So we started, as we were trained, to walk down the steps, in the case of a fire or some other problem, not to take the elevators. And we started in a very orderly way. I recall at first my thinking was, well, something has happened. I'm not sure what it is. Perhaps I'll just go out, take a walk for a few hours, come back. And my second thought, when I began to hear the tenor of the comments and what seemed like a more serious, potentially more serious event, went back and picked up my wallet and my keys for my apartment and started down the steps. It was very orderly, very peaceful, very quiet. No one seemed to be overly concerned as we walked down the stairwell. Then I overheard an announcement that the building was making. That announcement was that they had determined that a plane had struck tower number 1 and that emergency help was on the way. And because this was a little bit difficult to hear, but I happened to hear it, I repeated it to my colleagues who were walking down the steps with me. I said, a plane has struck tower number 1. Help is on, emergency assistance is on the way. But at that time, we had no sense of why a plane had entered tower number 1, or was it, a small helicopter or some other type of accident, similar to what had happened at the Empire State Building when a plane actually entered purely accidentally one of the upper floors.
So you didn't feel anything or hear anything when the first plane hit the tower? I mean, you were on the 82nd floor of the second tower, and you didn't hear anything, feel anything, the building shake, or nothing?
I felt nothing. I saw nothing. However, I looked out the window, and these very large buildings gave rise to very unusual air currents, sometimes coming around the corner of the building. I looked out the window, and what I thought I saw was confetti rising, going up. And I thought this strange. What I later realized was this was not confetti. These were 8.5 by 11 sheets of paper, but the enormity of and the scale of the buildings made it appear as though these were just small pieces of paper. Apparently, when the first plane struck the tower number 1, it blew out windows and all sorts of debris and other things, papers came out the window. But apart from that, there was no physical sense, there was no feeling of what had happened in Tower Number 1. No sound that I could hear.
So you are peacefully, orderly going down 82 flights of stairs.
We thought we could walk down. It's a long way, but it's not impossible. And then as I followed the crowd, even though we were instructed not to take an elevator, I sort of followed the crowd, and I noticed that there was kind of a freight elevator that people were entering. And it was almost filled, but there was a little space. I am a person who is not large in stature, and I thought, well, I'll just fit into that little space. And I did. I got onto the elevator. Although immediately after this event, it took me some time to recall what had actually happened. This was a time when, even though I appeared outwardly calm, what was going on inside was certainly turmoil and concern, but I was acting in an appropriate manner, as were just about everyone else. The elevator went down probably from the 82nd floor, where I started walking. I'd walk down to perhaps the 67th floor and got onto the elevator, which went down to the 44th floor. In the World Trade Center towers, there were two large sky lobbies, they were called, so that people could take one elevator up to 44th floor and then take a local that would stop on the individual floors, and similarly for 78 on the 78th floor. So when the elevator came down, the doors opened, and what I was confronted with was a sky lobby filled with hundreds of people on the 44th floor. The first time I realized the enormity of what had happened was then, because at the end of the sky lobby there were two video terminals. They were broadcasting the event from one of the news channels, and I could see that Tower Number 1 was on fire, and I could see the enormity and the extent of the damage. No one knew what would happen, and in fact, there was a guard, security personnel from the building that was advising people to return to their workstation. Do not go down to the plaza area. Do not exit the building. It was a terrible, tragic misjudgment, but the reason was ostensibly to protect those from debris that was falling down because of the plane that had struck Tower Number 1. There was a moment of inner thought. I doubted that that would be the right thing to do, to return to my office. After all, I'm a New Yorker. I'm a survivor. I have an instinct that says if something has happened nearby, like a fire or any sort of potential problem, get as far away from it as you can. What would I be doing? Going back to my office and sitting down and writing emails? I mean, it was inconceivable anyway that I would just go back and continue my work. But that all happened in just a few seconds. I was thinking, I don't think so. And then I felt the second plane enter the tower I was in, and I felt the building shake. I felt it move, and I knew instantly this was not an accident. This was an attack. This was a terrorist attack. And I thought the building may collapse at that moment, and I thought this might be the end of my life. And if it wasn't, when the third plane came, that might cause the end. Well, as we know, the third plane was headed, unfortunately, for a different location, Washington and Pennsylvania. So there were no other planes in New York.
So take it from the smack. I mean, you're on the 44th floor. Hundreds of people are there. Did chaos break out? What happened to everybody?
At that point, people realized that this was a very serious event. It was not a minor accident, and that there was severe danger. Roughly speaking, perhaps 10 or 15% of the people panicked. You know, you could hear screaming. Obviously, in a building like the World Trade Center, a sense of movement was very scary. And I could see things were flying across the room. So we knew that the impact was very powerful. I'm very lucky. I'm one of the lucky ones. There were many, and there were many who were not lucky. I looked around at that moment, just after the impact, and I saw an exit. I saw a stairwell, perhaps 10 feet away, and I darted for that stairwell. I saw no one ahead of me. I just went as quickly as I could down the steps and walked down 44 flights. When I came down to the bottom, the concourse, where there had been many shops, it was quiet. The shops were closed and the lights were off. I walked out through the subway, which was connected to the concourse, and came out of the subway a few blocks later. I hope that's okay.
You're doing great. You do that anytime you need to.
Okay. When I exited the subway, for the first time, I could see with my eyes what had happened. I looked up and I could see the towers on fire, aflame. Horrific, terrible. I knew that people must have been killed, and I knew this was an event of great significance, so much so that my first thought was to watch, because this is history happening, and I would witness history. I would watch it. But perhaps my instincts and my need to survive got the better part of my judgment, which in retrospect was the right thing, and I thought, no, I think I will just get as far away from here as I can. And in fact, I live in Greenwich Village, just about 2 miles away. It was a Tuesday morning, perhaps around 9:15, 9:20 or so. The second plane, by the way, entered the building I was in at about 9:03. So from that time until 9:15 or so, I had gone down 44 flights. I started to walk home because I thought, well, you know, I can use a little walk, unwind, relax a little bit, as much as I could. And a taxi happened to come around the corner. And so I jumped in the taxi. I got in and asked. The taxi driver, by the way, had no clue, no sense of what had happened. He was just cruising around looking for passengers. He took me home or nearby my apartment. I got off about 5 to 10 minutes later, and I entered my building. I walked into my apartment, and I looked out my living room window. One of the reasons I purchased a cooperative apartment at that location is because I had a view of the World Trade Center. I worked there for 7 years. I looked at the World Trade Center. They were a significant part of my life. In fact, for many, they were buildings from which one could fix their location. They would look at the Trade Center and know where they were. I looked at these buildings on fire, and I watched. A friend, well, my first inclination was to contact family members just to tell them what had happened and that I was at home. But the telephone lines were busy. Ironically, I did receive a call from a friend here in New York City who told me that a mutual friend of ours who lived in Australia was apparently watching television at that time and realized something had happened. He knew that I worked in the World Trade Center, and he was inquiring about my well-being. And so I said to my friend in New York, well, I will give him a call, which I did. And I spoke with my friend as I sat by my window watching the World Trade Centers on fire. And I spoke with him for quite a while, maybe 20, 30 minutes. And then what I saw was blue. And I remember telling my friend, I see blue. What had happened is the South Tower number 2, my building where I worked, had collapsed. But it was so incomprehensible. In fact, the entire event was so beyond one's ability to conceive such a thing that even though the building collapsed, and I saw it collapse, and I saw the blue sky where the building had once stood, I could not process this in my brain. I could only say, I see blue. And my friends said, William, have you spoken with your family? And I said, no, I tried to call them a little while ago, but I couldn't get through. Lines were busy. And he said, well, I'm going to hang up the phone now, and you try to reach your family, let them know what's going on. So we did. I called my sister, and as soon as she answered, I said, hello. And I have never, and I will never forget the scream of joy that she expressed. Just hearing my voice, she knew that I was alive. It didn't take much more. It was a very moving moment for both of us. And then I proceeded to call others and received many calls that day to ask what had happened and find out my well-being. What I said on that day was, physically, I was not injured. Mentally, my psyche is not the same. I was traumatized.
As many people were. It's amazing. You got out of there pretty quick. I mean, you weren't there when everything turned to gray and all the soot and all that stuff and everything. But tell me about some people that you mentioned. A gentleman that didn't make it out of the building. Did you lose a lot of people from your company that day? And was it because they were still in the building, or what happened to them?
Our office was located on the 79th, 80th, 81st, and 82nd floor. The plane that entered the South Tower came in essentially those floors, and so anyone who would have been there would be likely gone. They disappeared. I lost 23 colleagues. Of those 23, in the ensuing period, even up to a year later, as they identified remains, a memorial service would be held. But of the 23, I believe it was 11, there was never any identification, and there was never a memorial service held as a result, and they remain at the World Trade Center. They remain at that burial site, which is sanctified ground. And many people feel that that is the appropriate place for a memorial and to remember them. Perhaps some of my colleagues tragically listened to the instructions of the authorities and returned to their workstation. Some even, I know, went down to the lobby and then they were told to go back and they came back to the office. Others perhaps were not certain about what to do, and they were thinking, they were meeting to determine the best course of action, how to protect the institution, and what steps to take. And when the plane entered, they disappeared.
23, you said you lost.
23 colleagues, yes. At the time, of course, I knew that many people had been killed, but it wasn't for some days that we knew who they were, how many, who they were, and even in the overall, in the macro sense of all of those who were lost at the World Trade Center, it took quite some time to identify everyone who was lost. In fact, there was this hopeful, it was very sad, but there was a hope that many of the people who had been in the World Trade Centers were in local hospitals, and so many people were visiting the hospitals looking for them. Sadly, there were very few people who were injured. Some, but not too many. And of the people who tragically perished on that day, it was just an instantaneous loss. We know many stories of those who perished. We know of people who were faced with fire and evacuated by leaping out of the building to their death. One cannot imagine what could go through someone's mind before doing that. It's a very difficult thing that we all hope we'd never have to face.
I've heard some amazing stories of that. And like you said, the thinking, the options, a few options that you would have, they call that an option. But yeah, I was going to ask you, that second plane hit right about where your offices were, and oh man. Did you attend any of the funeral or memorial services for these colleagues? Do they have them?
Everyone, yes, as they were identified, as the remains were identified through whatever fragments that were recovered and DNA evidence or other sorts of proof. There were many different funerals held, memorial services, over the ensuing period up to a year. On September 11th, when I came home, I thought the world had changed. I thought that none of us was safe anymore. I faced mortality, and I realized that it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when for all of us. And I also realized that anything can happen to anyone at any time. All I had on that day was raw hope. I thought the world had changed, and I thought that this might be the beginning of the end. Here we are, 10 years later. Some terrible things have happened, but we know that a terrorist attack on this scale has not occurred again in the United States. Many, many people have suffered and died throughout the world, but at least in this country we have not suffered another cataclysmic sudden attack, and of course we hope that never again will this occur. All I had that day was hope, and I can say 10 years later that my hope was realized, that we have returned to a certain normalcy. We have returned to a sense that life goes on, and we shall never forget, and we will commemorate on September 11th the 10-year anniversary, which will be the end of the ensuing period following the attack on the World Trade Center. We will be entering a new phase. The World Trade Center is roughly 65 stories rising, higher each day. It's a very exciting prospect for those of us who lost so much. And the memorial will be opening on September 11th as well to commemorate and be a permanent place for people to go and recall all those who perished as well as the events of that day.
Yeah, that's what I'm hearing on the 11th. Don't you have to be invited to that, though, or is that an invitation deal? Or
Yes, there are a number of groups who were involved in September 11th. Well, there are many groups, and there were many people. In fact, there were people who were not even close to New York City, all throughout the country and all throughout the world, who felt connected and were affected emotionally and otherwise. But in terms of those who were directly affected, there were essentially three groups. There were people who worked in the building and perished. There were people who were in the building, survivors, such as myself, and there were emergency responders, first responders, New York City Police Department and New York Fire Department, and then the families of those who perished. Because of the nature of this ceremony that will occur September 11th, 2011, they have limited the access to the families of those who are lost. I feel very close to everyone who participated or was subject to these tragic events, but in a way, those who survived are the ones who can tell the story. They were there. They know what it was like inside, and they know what happened afterwards, even though the losses that we sustained in many cases were something that we could overcome. I would like to say that September 11th, 2001 had the greatest significance in my life. That day was the most significant day of my life. I was born after the Second World War. I lived the American dream, you know, growing up in the suburbs and going off to college, coming to New York City, finding a wonderful job, and living a basically happy life. There are always ups and downs and things happen, but I had no complaints, and I enjoyed my life very much until September 11th. And then the suffering that I experienced, the trauma, the pain, the post-traumatic stress disorder, and the loss, and the quiet, and the cataclysmic feeling that the world had changed and that no one was safe. I suffered greatly, more so than I had ever felt before. After that, many months were spent helping my company to recover, survive, retrieve lost articles, and continue business. At the end of a period of perhaps 2 months, when my post-traumatic stress disorder symptoms kind of abated, and even in the ensuing following years, I began to appreciate my life because I knew that every day is a gift. And I began to appreciate my life, some days more than others, but more so than I ever had before. And so the sense of suffering had expanded. I'd suffered more than I'd ever suffered before. But when that was dealt with, when that was accepted, and when I was able to move on, the sense of appreciation for this country, for my life, for the relative sense of safety that followed, made me appreciate and live my life as though any day could be my last and every day would be my best.
Well said. That's great. You mentioned when you wrote me your email, and even now you mentioned you've suffered. You've been diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD.
The trauma of the event affected many people in many different ways. I do think that there are thousands of stories, and the experience of this event touched people who were there and who were not there in a very powerful way. Yes, I sought counseling. The best advice that I received, and this was just a few days later, I was visiting, I went to St. Vincent's Hospital, which was set up for those who were injured. And sadly, there were very few there, if any injured victims of the attack. I spoke with a social worker, and I said, you know, I've been watching this on television because as the events unfold, I just want to know what's going on. And his advice to me was, turn off your television. And that's what I did. I don't cook, but what I started to do is watch the Food Network. I may as well have turned on cartoons. But the point was, get your mind off this. The television coverage, of course, was excellent, and the world was focused on these events, but the image of the planes entering the building, which was repeated over and over and over again, and even till this day, it's shown, because the second plane especially, all eyes were on the World Trade Center. And even now, it's there's there's a great sensitivity, and if I watch any sort of coverage, I have to be very careful that it's done with a certain level of respect, and my mindset has to be prepared in order to watch it. As far as others, there were thousands of stories, and there were many people who suffered greatly. Some people, unfortunately, have not been able to get past the trauma, and even on this day, things like an aircraft that's flying at a low level, or a loud sound, or even the earthquake that occurred in Virginia just a few days ago, but was actually felt as far north as New York and Toronto. That triggered certain trauma within some people. So I feel that I've moved on from that, but when I revisit, when I re-experience on September 11th or other occasions, certainly the sensitivity is there, and I have to be very careful not to cause any further damage.
Sure. Yeah, like with the war veterans that I interview, I know there's things that bring back, you know, the memories of all that. So I'm sure with you too. And do you ever think about why you made it out? Maybe a lot of others didn't make it out.
One thing I do not engage in is what if thinking. We know what happened, and had it been different, perhaps I would not have made it out. I did not experience the so-called survivor's guilt. I just felt that as a New Yorker, as someone who has protected himself, someone who's had a a life here in New York City for nearly 40 years without any incident or any trouble, any problem. I just had to do what my instincts suggested and get out of the building. But when I revisit, and certainly every year on September 11th, I rethink, I re-experience, I reconnect, and there's always an emotional response as I think back to that day. Last year on September 11th, it was a day off, it was Saturday, and I went down to the World Trade Center. Or actually, the World Trade Center at that time and even now is a construction site. And so the ceremony was held across the street. The most dignified way it was held. First, Mayor Bloomberg came out without any introduction and spoke a few words. And then Governor Patterson came out and spoke some words. And that was followed by Vice President Joseph Biden. And he also spoke very moving but brief remarks. And then the names were read. And I recognized those names, some of them. And I remembered some of the people. And I remembered that day. And tears, sadness, emotion was re-experienced. Yet at the end of the day, it was time to move on and return back to my life, never forgetting, always appreciating the significance of that day, but the hope that I had has been realized, and my normal life, even at the bank where I continue to work, has resumed.
Good. You're doing great. Well, you've kind of already answered this question, but just I'm going to ask it anyways. But how is your life different today, 10 years later?
The world changed. I think I am much more aware of the suffering that people throughout the world have experienced. I know that anything could happen at any time, and that includes places, unfortunately, such as Afghanistan, Iraq. People are going about their business, and a suicide bomber is present and causes death and destruction. I realize that our sense of safety is not absolute, but I also faced mortality, and I have no fear that when it happens, which I hope will be a long time from now, I will accept it. It will not be something I haven't experienced. I would also say that 10 years later, it's sad that these events are repeating themselves in the world, and terrorism still exists. But I am proud to say that I have not become cynical. I still have hope, and I still hope for a better life for everyone.
I'm going to ask you a question, William, that I ask all the war veterans at the end of an interview. I want you to think about the word freedom. And just tell me in your own way what freedom means to you.
Freedom is a very important value that we have in the United States. It is perhaps one of the most important privileges we have to conduct our lives in a way that we choose, whether it's religious pursuit, employment, pleasure, anything else. And I think that there's tolerance in this country for anyone who is conducting their life as they see fit. Freedom to do that which provides for the pursuit of happiness, provides, in fact, those who achieve happiness a great life. And this is still a great country because we have freedom, because we have the privileges of an ability to make the most of our lives, to become who we are, and to conduct ourselves in a way that is suitable to our own inner who we are.
Sure. Good. The American flag, what does the American flag mean and represent to you?
As you know, the American flag was a symbol following, well, of course it is a symbol always, but following September 11th, there were more American flags one could see just going out and about than any time in my life. Even now, on September 11th, the anniversary, for example, in my building, there are very large American flags that are hung. Last year on September 11th, I mentioned attending the ceremony across from the World Trade Center construction site. The first thing they did before the individual spoke was to bring out the American flag that was flying at the World Trade Center. Tattered, worn, but it was still there. And thoughts of the Star-Spangled Banner, and thoughts of survival, and thoughts of we will prevail, there is hope, and here we are. The American flag pulled us all together. It was a symbol that we are all New Yorkers, we're all in this together, and we are all feeling the same thing. It was very, very moving, to say the least, and I expect that this year there will also be a display of flags unlike what we see even on July 4th.
Do you think it's important that you tell your stories for future generations?
I think that it is very important that everyone in the future understands what happened. This is history. This was an extraordinarily unusual event. Let us hope that this was a one-time event, that it never occurs again. And just as we think back and we have considered, even for those of us who were not born at the time, Pearl Harbor, and we look at that day and we think back and we remember those who perished on that day and the events that followed. And something that I would put on a similar type of category was the day that John Kennedy was assassinated. I was alive, and I think, like many of us, or maybe just about all of us, we all know where we were on that day, and we all know how we were informed of what had happened. The possibility of instantaneous death or destruction can happen at any time. There can be an earthquake, a fire, or even more typically, a car accident. It happens every day in this country. It happens thousands of times. It's a micro event. It's just as tragic. People are killed. You know, they're just going about their business and they're driving, or a fire occurs and they lose their life. But the World Trade Center was an event that the enormity of which was unprecedented. The loss of life was incomprehensible, and it was an event given the media and the coverage that brought the entire world together. We were all focused on this event, and I believe that we should remain focused. Children should be educated as to what happened. Those of us who experienced it should talk about it and repeat it. And the message, if nothing else, is that even though terrible things happen, there is always hope. One must always go on and do the best under any circumstances, because if one does not have hope, there is no hope. So we always hope for a better life, and in fact, we know 10 years later that that's been realized. I think it's very important that all Americans and everyone throughout the world knows about what happened on September 11th, 2001.
Well said. Like you said, you looked up at the buildings because you knew history was being made. That was a good statement. And that's why I'm doing this. We need to record this history before it's forgotten or politics enter in or whatever happens to it, preserve it. And that's what we're doing here. So you're very calm in your demeanor. I mean, that's great. For what you've gone through, it's like, wow. Have you told your story before?
I have many, many times. In fact, I think that telling the story, in a certain sense, is part of the process. Telling my story to people who have compassion and understanding and interest has helped me a lot to process it myself. And in fact, it's interesting to me that when I do tell my story, and I will go back to the way I tell my story, but when I tell my story, I learn more about the people I'm telling it to, because of course I know it happened myself, and each time I tell the story, perhaps there's some slight variation, but the essential facts remain, as always. I was on a ship headed to New York. Primarily, people on the ship, fellow passengers, were from the UK. And sitting around the dinner table with people I didn't know, I would start a conversation and say things like, well, we're headed to New York. I'm a New Yorker. Perhaps I can give you some advice as to what to do when you're in New York. It's a big city, great city. There's a lot to do. What are you thinking about doing there? And almost invariably, the fellow passengers would say, well, and at that time, this was referred to as Ground Zero. They would say, we want to visit Ground Zero. And I would say, I was on the 82nd floor. I could see what they were thinking. Their first thought was, what is this man saying? Their second thought was, this man was in the World Trade Center at the time of the attack. Their third thought was, he must have been killed. And their fourth thought was, well, here he is talking with us. Obviously, he survived. And then they would say to me, well, how did you get out? And I would tell them my story, and they were very interested. So telling the story, for me, is cathartic. It's a process that has been helpful to move past it in a way. Yet I have no doubt that this day will remain of the greatest significance in my life. I certainly hope so, because I wouldn't want to think that anything would happen in the future that would in any way be a worse day or another experience of any sort that would be as powerful and negative and disturbing and traumatic.
And it's almost unreal at times just to hear the stories and to imagine. We were down there the other day just trying to imagine it all. It's hard to process all that. It's like,
The events that followed September 11, 2001 were absolutely surreal. On some level, we knew what had happened, almost intellectually. Emotionally, it was very difficult to process this. One of the characteristics of that day, September 11th, as well as the period that followed, the weeks after, was what was not there. The people, the buildings, and the sounds. The New York City, which is a lively city that never sleeps, was silent. People were walking around in shock. No one had to say anything because everyone knew what everyone else was thinking. The hope that I had on September 11th and in the period that followed was very difficult. The most difficult experience of my life. In early October, well, I should say that I have a passion for classical music. And in fact, there was a concert on September 14th, New York Philharmonic, that was canceled. But at Carnegie Hall on October 5th, I believe, the Berlin Philharmonic came to Carnegie Hall. This was an act of great courage, great bravery, because at that time, of course, flying in planes and coming to New York was something that required a lot of courage, faith. The Berlin Philharmonic came and provided a gift to New York. The program that they had originally planned to perform, some Mahler symphonies, they changed totally. And what they performed were Beethoven symphonies. There was not a word spoken, but everyone knew that this concert was a gift of hope to New Yorkers. And when I heard the music just almost a month later, it was the first time that I knew that there is truth and there is beauty in the world, and that my hope for the world to return to a more normal state were possible. It was a very uplifting experience. It was the first time that any sense of despair started to lift, the darkness started to lift. And this was even during a time when the World Trade Center, which had collapsed into a pile of rubble, was still smoking. And it took quite some time after that until it was totally removed. But thanks to the Berlin Philharmonic and the music, there was a sense that our hopes may be realized.
That's good. That's a good story. Is there anything you left out? We got about 2 minutes. I mean, I think you did good. You covered it really well. I heard what I was hoping to hear. You feel good?
I greatly appreciate the opportunity to tell my story. I think it's very important. I speak on behalf of myself, and I think that when you talk with others, each person will have a slightly different experience, but all of the experience that each individual has is a little bit different and just as valid. I would only say that the experience was of great significance. I don't engage in what if, but I do think the only exception, what if I had not been there that day? What if I had taken the day off, or was on vacation, or just arrived a little late? I would have missed it. And so the most important day of my life would not have occurred. And the appreciation and the love of this wonderful life I have in this wonderful country would have not been as great as it can be. And so I am deeply thankful to have been part of this experience, to relate it to others, to say that there is always hope, and that through adversity we can become much more satisfied in our lives and appreciate all of the wonderful freedoms and privileges in this great United States.